Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us for our webinar today, our Brightelm webinar. I think each time we do this, I get more and more excited about the topics we're discussing and the panel which we've got on. For the first time today, we're going to be including a video in the webinar, which is a pre-recorded interview I did with somebody who is a great advocate of accessibility to conferences for the scientific community. More about that shortly, and I'll be introducing the panel shortly first. So very quick pitch, if you like, about Brightelm and what we do. If we could have the slide, please, Jed. Thanks very much. So Brightelm is a professional conference organizer. We specialize in helping our clients improve how they deliver their events. We have 7 core services: project management, sponsorship, event marketing, program management or content and abstracts, delegate services, logistics, and exhibitions. That's all. That's the pitch. That's all we do, just so you know what we do. And we're here to help. Just get in contact with us. Thanks very much, Jed. Jed, by the way, is my project coordinator who's helping me stream today and doing a fantastic job. Thank you very much. So to introduce the topic, the future of association events. It affects us all, but I don't think, I still think personally, I'm still not sure what the future holds for us. And one of the reasons why I wanted to run this event was really, run this webinar, was to really gain an understanding of what other people are thinking about the future. And I'm not just talking about the next 12 months while we hopefully, which we will hopefully be calling post-pandemic, but also about the next 5-10 years. You know, how will sustainability affect our events? How will accessibility, diversity and inclusion, as well as developments in tech, affect how we deliver events for our communities? So I'm going to introduce our panel now. Firstly is Nika Current from CIARB, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Good morning, Nika. Thank you very much for joining. You consider yourself an event geek, which is a great description. I might consider myself that as well, which I think is one of the reasons why we get on well. 20 years of experience in events and hospitality industries, high-end hotel groups of sales and events, before moving to Biocide's head of events for it says WAGs, but it's the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts.
Yeah, we say the full name.
Okay.
Say the full name.
Excellent. FIGO, Federation of International Gynecology and Obstetrics. And now you've recently moved to the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, currently looking at your 2022 World Conference. I know we've spoken lots about how you want to improve project management processes and increase the impact of events for membership organizations. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. So pleased you could make it today. What question for you? What trends are you seeing in events at the moment?
Thanks, Rob, for having me. Trends in events. When you told us you're going to ask us this question, it was a big kind of what is happening. But I think it's more the fact that we are yet to see, I think, what trends will develop. I think at the moment we're still in that grace period where we are allowed to have time to develop, to innovate, to try out new things, but also to make mistakes. I think that grace period is slowly coming to an end. We'll have to ramp up what we do. But maybe easier for me to answer is from the event planning side. The lead times have significantly shortened. I have an event in October. I don't have speakers confirmed. I don't have the virtual platform. I don't have the sponsors, but I'm fine. I'm not stressing out. I know I have enough time because also the behavior of our participants have changed. They will not book their events, 6 months out because it's an online event. So they want to see a month in, 2 weeks in, if they actually have time, unless it's something that they've been waiting for a number of years. But yeah, from the event planning, the timeline I think is the biggest change, for at least for my work.
I agree with you completely, and certainly, I mean, we're seeing, I guess our average lead time is currently 8 weeks. Before lockdown, it was minimum 12 weeks for a sort of significant conference with a couple of days content. Thanks very much, Nika. We'll be coming back to you a bit later. Next up is Neil Thompson. Welcome, Neil. Thanks very much for joining. I work very closely with Neil and the delegate wranglers. Neil is the founder, but he also has 22 years experience in the event industry. The delegate wranglers is a very interesting community. It's kind of grown organically from a very small Facebook group in 2014, now has over 21,000 highly engaged members. Neil, which I love, Neil was named as the MIT magazine's Personality of the Year, Mr. Personality we call him, and the group also has climbed to the giddy heights of Facebook Community Managed Partner status, which is an incredible achievement. You actually have a one-to-one dialogue with Facebook, don't you, Neil?
Yeah, and I'm going to kill you about the MIT Personality of the Year thing.
That's right. That's right. You can do that later. Neil, what I know you kind of oversee the community, but I know you network and speak a lot too.
Yeah.
What trends are you seeing in events at the moment?
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me on this, Rob. Really appreciate it. Yeah, on the group, we're like a barometer of the industry, really. So we see what people are searching for, what they're looking for, what the latest things they're after. And obviously, it's been really interesting over the last 18 months or so, the way people scramble to get online and do online events. And now we're kind of moving to hybrid events. And I know we're going to talk about that a bit later on in this discussion. But we're also seeing lots of outdoor things, Rob, as well. People looking to do outdoor events, and maybe that's a bit of kind of safety factor in case they're thinking the government changes what we can and can't do. So we are seeing a lot of that, but also a lot of online performance-based things and cocktail making and all that kind of thing. That's really boomed in the last 12 months or so.
Certainly, I think online activities, a lot of activities will be here to stay, I think, particularly as workforces have a much more blended approach to work versus with some people still in the office, but a lot more people working remotely. Thank you very much, Neil. We'll hear a bit more from you later. Our last panelist is Paul Martin, Executive Director of EventShare, and we are actually using the EventShare platform to broadcast today. So thank you very much for joining us, Paul. Paul, you've been with EventShare for over 20 years.
I have, Rob. Yeah, sometimes it. You don't have to remind me. It's been a really interesting ride, and I think the last 15 months has been more interesting than any other in the time of the organisation. So yeah, been really interesting. But technology, of course, has taken a completely new spin in the importance for an event planner in the last 15 months. So
yeah, absolutely. And what I guess. What trends are you seeing from your perspective?
Well, again, it's thank you for having me also, and it's difficult to follow Mr. Personality. I tell you, that's a really daunting task. But the trends in the last in the industry at this point in time. One of the things that really, it's a word that we really don't like using after, again, the last 15 months, but uncertainty. We're seeing more uncertainty. And as an event planner, if we look at some of the countries that have unlocked, the likes of Australia, New Zealand, those countries have had then these snap lockdowns. And it's created real challenges for event planners where, they've had to have redundancy of some way. And it's typically digital to be able to say, well, if something happens, if my event can't go ahead in person, what do I do? So, having more redundancy, a lot more fallback. People are a lot more open to the fact that there is going to be change, and I think that's going to be an ongoing trend.
Absolutely, and contingency planning is such a big part of what we do. It's always been a big part of event planning, but actually now it's a little more complicated, shall we say. Thanks so much, Paul. Again, we will see you a bit later. Our fourth panelist actually isn't here today. The reason she isn't here is because she's based in Boston in the US, and we felt 4:30 it wasn't quite fair to ask her to attend a 4:30 a.m. Rehearsal call. So we pre-recorded a video yesterday. The guest is Dr. Yamina Bershish. She's also known as Dr. GCPR. She's an experienced scientist specializing in a GPCR function, but has previously worked for the US National Institutes of Health and the Rockefeller University. And she's a strong advocate for accessibility to meetings for all scientists, but especially early career investigators. Now, we met on, we were producing an event for a client 2 weeks ago. I was looking after the stream, and in the run-up, we just had, we got our test done, and we were in the 15-minute run-up, and so I just asked her what she did. Anyway, we nearly delayed the start. We nearly missed the start of the meeting because we suddenly became very engaged, had a very passionate conversation about accessibility, particularly for early career investigators, looking at their careers and how we can use events to support their career growth better. The video is around 12-15 minutes long, and so we're going to start it now, and we'll see you afterwards. Thanks very much, everybody. I'd like to welcome Dr. Yamina Bashishe today. Thanks very much for joining, Yamina. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rob. I'm excited to be here today. As you mentioned in our conversation before hitting record, we've met a couple of weeks ago and we hit it off really quickly. Yeah. And I'm so happy that we get to talk today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to kick off straight away with the tough stuff. When we spoke, we were talking about barriers to attending conferences, particularly for young scientists. And I wonder what you thought that really the biggest barriers for attendance are at live. Let's talk about live conferences for now.
Live in-person conferences.
Yeah.
I think the barriers for live in-person conferences are being able to attend the meeting, traveling to that meeting site, being able to afford the costs of being at that meeting, but also needing to ask permission from their supervisors to actually go to the meeting. And most of the time, in my experience, that is tied to not only funding, but also tied to data to present. So you cannot go to a conference as a tourist, as I like to call it, but you go to a conference as a presenter. The other burden, I think, or the other difficulty for young scientists to go and show off their work at in-person conferences is getting access to giving an oral presentation instead of giving a poster presentation. Don't get me wrong, I think poster presentations are great occasions where you can really have a heated discussion with 3 or 4 people stopping at your poster, but you would never get that exposure that you would get at giving a live oral presentation in front of 200 people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, and is it fair to say that poster presentations are a bit of a second-class experience for people?
I think it can be. Sometimes you can have a great poster presentation and everyone will want to come to you, and most of the time at these events, even numbers are even poster numbers on one night, and then odd numbers on the other night. And if you're lucky, then you have to present at both nights because people drag you to your poster. But I still think that, you know, for 90% or 99% of scientists, that's something that doesn't happen to them. So you can get lost. And sometimes I think the worst feeling as a scientist, and it did happen to me, is that when you're standing at your poster, on your left and on your right side, you have other posters where people are engaging into conversations and people just stop by and smile at you if they do, and look at the title of your poster, and they just very nicely move on, hoping that you didn't notice that they're not interested in your work.
I've had the same experience standing on exhibition stands sometimes, and you know that's really, really tough. And you do smile at lots of people. Let's talk about that process a bit more. And I want to talk about one from this idea of how we choose what science is presented in the first place, and secondly, I'd like to look a bit more about how we can make conference attendance more accessible. But I want to talk first of all about this whole idea of peer reviewed science. And you know, I've got this vision of of very senior scientists sitting down with their spreadsheet of abstracts, reviewing everything and passing judgment on whether a piece of research is good enough to present or not. Are we is that too old hat? Does that still have merit?
I think that's the old school of doing, at least in my opinion, it's very old school of doing that.
We're all about opinions here. All about opinions.
I think so. Just to give you an idea, and we've talked about this before when we first met, we organize for the community I'm in virtual meetings, and we're not talking about in-person meetings. I think there is a limitation to in-person meetings. There are advantages because we get to meet and we get to go to the bar and have drinks afterwards. We also get to have heated discussions in person. But I think when we take those meetings out of the context of in-person meetings and we put them into a virtual context, that gives us more liberties. Liberties not to have a committee of 3 or 4 meeting organizers who would decide who would give an oral presentation versus a poster. And we also get the ability to showcase more science. We can have as many oral presentations because we can have them in the form of pre-recorded talks, which in my opinion, democratizes meetings. As scientists, I'd like to think that we all have our opinions. We all have our quote unquote competitors. And I'm all for democratizing meetings, making sure that everyone and anyone who's done scientific work gets a chance to get their work out there, gets a chance to present their work. That increases their confidence, but also allows them and the rest of the scientific community to interact in some form. And I'm not here to judge who should give a talk or who shouldn't give a talk. I think in the context of the meetings that we've been organizing, everyone is welcome. And it's an old barrier that we're trying to break down. A lot of times people think that just because I'm a principal investigator and I've been in the field for 25 years, I must have a live oral presentation, or just because I'm a second-year postdoc or a second-year PhD student, I can only present a poster. Which is why in our events, there is no such thing as poster presentations. And I've been posting about it on social media, and I've been recording videos and telling people anyone can present at the conferences we organize around a specific scientific topic. But let's stop segregating scientists.
I agree with you, but completely. I think we, as from the events community perspective, we have. I think we've struggled for quite a few years in order to actually reach those decision makers. So the boards which make the decision about abstract process, for example, are quite often beyond our reach because we're considered in the supply chain and way down the line. What I've found actually, certainly with the projects I've been working on, is that because this is a new online events are a relatively new field, there's a lot of discomfort and unknowns from the scientific community about what can and can't be done. And I think we've got a long way to go really to and it's down to the events community to do this, to look at the timeline of an event online, because there's still a big tendency to think of an event as a linear process which is constrained by time. Actually, it isn't. So, what if, for example, and you can tell me, you can please tell me the positives and the pitfalls of this. Why can't, if we need to judge and review science, why can't that be done by everybody who's attended the Congress? Why can't we publish an abstract book 3 weeks in advance and ask people to review that science and then decide? Why don't the attendees decide which pieces of research they want to hear more about?
I think that's something that can be done, especially in the era of Zoom and online meetings, and I think that's something that should be done. I can give you an example. Last year, for example, we've organized a first virtual online conference within the topic of GPCRs, and all the talks were pre-recorded. It was, a first pass at this type of event, and each speaker got to send us a video of their presentation. We also asked for something that people were confused about, is a video abstract of 3 minutes or less.
Mhm.
Everyone is used of writing 250 words abstracts and then sending the text in. And we've also made it possible for people to interact on the speaker's page at the bottom, where they could chat with the speaker and exchange thoughts. And I think that's something that's not new. However, it's really simple, that can be applied to any scientific virtual conference and really get people to interact more.
I think I particularly like the idea of certainly abstract videos, but also perhaps you touched on their abstract recordings, small 3-minute recordings instead of poster presentations, for example, because that still gives people the opportunity to present. The advantage to them is they only have to present the once. They don't have to have the same conversation about 5 or 6 times, but the technology exists to very easily for an attendee to be able to follow up with the author. Hopefully the author is attending live at the event too, and can be contacted via the platform's attendee list or something like that. I want to talk a little bit more about the barrier, the kind of physical barriers to attendance. Do virtual meetings solve all of those barriers for people, do you think?
I think virtual meetings, and even in the virtual meetings, there's 2 ways we've been looking at it. One, when you have live virtual meetings, when you have to be there on time to listen to the talk. I think the advantage of that is that you get to ask questions after the presentation, and you get to have that discussion with the presenter, but also with the people who are attending to that live event. The constrictions around a live event, that it is in a time zone that may not be good for you. It could be at 4 a.m. UK time or 2 a.m. in Australia. Believe it or not, sometimes people in Australia or in the UK still join the events in the US, even if it's the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when it comes to online live events. I think one barrier that is taken completely out of the way is having pre-recorded talks, where it can be any time in your country, in your time zone, and you can just go online and enjoy a nice scientific talk. What you don't get out of that is that interaction live with the speaker. But I think with today's technology, you can email the speaker, you can tweet about that talk, you can ask questions to the community. So I think there's ways to make up for that inability to have that quote unquote face-to-face conversation when the talk is happening.
And I don't think anyone is saying that we should be doing away with live meetings, because they create so much value. But my belief certainly is we need to be making these meetings as accessible to as many people as we possibly can. And I think in the events industry, we've broken through a bit of a barrier in the pandemic. An amazing positive outcome from the pandemic is that we've embraced technology. We finally embraced it. We've stopped as an industry saying, no, we must bring everybody live together. And I've seen some incredible output from that. So just very quickly, because I'm conscious of time, what, in your opinion, does the scientific community need from the events industry over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the events industry needs to help the scientific community understand that there is the technology that allows us to conduct in-person meetings and at the same time stream those meetings. I hope that there will never ever be in-person meetings only anymore. I hope that we can open up meetings to have them at the same time in person for those who can travel, and make the talks or make the conversations available online, and record these presentations to make science more broadly available. I think the events industry's mission should be to make scientists aware of the technology, facilitate the adoption of these technologies by scientists. I think there is, in the scientific community, there is this "we've always done it this way" group, And I think that group needs to understand that there's other ways of doing it, and we would still have that exchange. We actually would increase interactions, we would increase collaborations, because at the end of the day, what matters is that interaction of scientists and the dissemination of scientific data.
I agree with you completely. I think we're the events community. We're a certain way there, and I think we've become, certainly live meetings, I would hope will be have become more accessible over the last few years regarding providing networking opportunities, that sort of thing. Online certainly is much more accessible, and I think there's some great technology around which really gets people coming together. I think the biggest challenge for us, which hasn't been figured out yet, is how we get the two audiences interacting as one, and how we can really make that happen in a way which is, one, is easy, and two, creates real value. But I guess we'll be looking to some of our suppliers for solutions there. Yamina, I want to thank you so much for giving up your time today. You're incredibly busy, and I'm really appreciate it. And I'm sure the audience and the panel certainly will have a lot to discuss after this, I'm sure. And thank you very much. I'm going to hand back now to Rob.
Thank you so much, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Great. And we're back. It was a pleasure talking to Yamina, and before we pressed record, but it took me 20 minutes to press the record button because we had so much to talk about. Plus, then we had another 20 minutes afterwards as well. I guess so. The quick note for the audience who are watching: you can take part in this session as well. Please use the discussion forum to raise any comments, or use the live Q&A buttons. They're both on the right hand side of your screens if you have any questions for the panel. So what were your key takeaways from that discussion? Nika, I'm going to come to you first.
It was really interesting to hear, and I just instantly remembered we did a hybrid event in Kigali in December 2020. So the height of pandemic. It was brave but also slightly stupid thing to do, but proud that we did it. But what I wanted to say is that we did exactly that. We allowed everybody who submitted an abstract to post either a poster or a short presentation in the abstract part of the platform. We didn't restrict them. We gave them the option of what would they prefer, or both. We did have a panel of reviewers, but that was mostly to also protect the ones who maybe aren't ready, because some of the abstracts just didn't have a beginning at the end, or didn't make any sense, right? So you maybe don't want to expose them to the community, and maybe want to protect them. So, but what I wanted to say is, looking at analytics after that event, 3 months after, the highest visited pages or the highest watched recordings were actually of posters. So all of the other sessions had kind of a mediocre views after the event, but the posters were sky high in thousands. It was amazing to see.
Well, I guess the posters are aware that it depending on your process, but there is one program I'm working on at the moment, which is the main program is already full of invited speakers. It's the new science will come from the new studies will come from the posters, and we're doing everything we can to make that as exciting and accessible, but also as inclusive to everybody as possible. Neil, what did you think about what Yamina was saying? I mean, she said so much, but
Yeah, no, you know what? Going back to just what Nika was saying there about how well that part of the page was visited, with the posters. That doesn't surprise me at all, because that's the real factual thing that online events can do. They can provide all this factual things, and it's always been able to do that. And you've got a really good place to do it. I think in-person events, it's a lot more about the talking to people, and you might stand next to somebody at a poster and discuss it. So it doesn't surprise me that people are still going there to look at that data. But the other thing, Rob, that I took from it as well is, there has been a kind of step in between kind of online and in-person poster presentations, and that is the kind of electronic posters that you can get, you know, like with a touchscreen. I don't know if you've ever done. I'm sure you have, Nika and Rob. But you know, they're the kind of like halfway house, if you like, because you know you can go on there and touch this for a bit more info, and then a box will come out with, you know, more kinds of things. And I think that's just one little step, one little way of integrating that. And I remember those worked really well, the ones that I did, and I always thought this is going to be the future of posters, but now it's obviously going to be that and online as well, because so that people can see it online. Because I think it's a tricky one, isn't it, particularly with poster presentations, because that's one of the reasons that you're kind of encouraging people to go, so that you can see this information, you know, and attend and see these things. So it's going to be really interesting. I know we're going to just talk about it in a second, but really interested to see how things are going to pan out with associations with regards to things like that.
I think the idea of e-posters is great, but for me it misses a fundamental point, which is the poster is a great opportunity for the scientists to network and present their data. So whilst it solves the problem of having, you know, of a commercial empty space, as it were, because actually you take up this big space as a poster hall with lots and lots of posters, which also isn't sustainable, and posters are really difficult to transport for the scientists, particularly if they're flying internationally. But I've yet to see an e-poster system which is cost effective enough to allow poster presentation at the same true presentation of that work at the same time. And so that's a little bit which I think, and I'm sure it's just that I haven't seen the right technology, not it doesn't exist. Paul, from your perspective, I guess for me, one of the big things is the bridging the gap between the connection between the live and the online audience, and how we create that feeling of community. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, look, and it was said earlier on, you know, going into hybrid, we're all still moving into this a little bit and finding our way. There's certainly been events that have been hybrid pre-COVID, but you know, the events industry at large, I think we all have to admit that we were reasonably reluctant to go into a virtual space. In person was where we all lived, and that was where we really wanted to live. And COVID changed a lot of that. And so in a hybrid space, we're now looking at, you know, what we might have thought was a hybrid event historically. Is that still the baseline? Is that still good enough? And, you know, for a lot of us in technology, it's not, because that Pandora's box has been opened now, where we do so much with technology, and the audience that's using that technology are now expecting not to be second fiddle to a live audience member. So it's a case of, you know, I've heard some really interesting views on hybrid. I've heard people talk about running split programs where some sessions are going to be live, some are going to be hybrid, or some are going to be virtual, and they're going to be segregated audiences. In my mind, that doesn't really work. A hybrid event has to be all inclusive, and it has to be a way for not only the content to be delivered to everybody seamlessly, simultaneously, but also giving all of those participants the ability to interact on a basis whenever they want. It's on demand.
It's a very interesting point. I think that I saw what you were mentioning there about using a combination of live and virtual together, but in separate sessions. Somebody explained to me the other day what it's called blended, which I've heard people talk about blended, and I like you, I struggle to see how that's of benefit. And I'm still concerned that there's a big part of the event industry which are trying to force people to meet live again. Now, I know some, you know, supply chain certainly has commercial interests in doing that. I get that, completely support it. But I think from the event stakeholders community, there still feels like there's a significant proportion of the industry who are pushing for live, almost pushing for a virtual experience to be in some way second class on purpose. You know, with the ABCO conference we're planning in December, we're the Festival of Learning, we're calling it. We're actually seeing, we're going to see quite a bit of rate parity between online and in person, because we want the experience to be similar.
Yeah.
What do the panel? I'll come at you first, Paul. What do you think about that? Are you still feeling that reticence a bit?
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think it's very normal for people to want to go back to what they know. It's putting a comfy pair of shoes on and, you know, getting back to what we all termed as normal. I think in doing that, what we do is we potentially miss the opportunity. And today we were talking specifically a little bit about association industry. And I think for associations, the virtual world actually is an enormous benefit in the respect that it can broaden their reach in their member base. So, you know, members that historically might not have joined because there was sort of geographical boundaries, events were running, you know, in geographical areas, so it didn't really make sense to join that association. By having a virtual component, it now takes away that barrier, increases the reasons to become a member. And then secondary to that, it's then a case of in running a virtual meeting, it then means that we can now increase the number of attendees that we're now delivering content to, which is, you know, really part of our mandate as an association, sharing and distributing content, but also then increasing our revenue because we've now got a higher attendance, be it virtual or in person.
I was very interested by a move. It was a move either by, I'm not sure it was the ESC, I think it was another kind of major European Congress, which even before we started talking about the pandemic was looking at to go from much more hub and spoke model for their conference. So creating regional hubs. So rather than bringing everybody to Amsterdam for 5 days from across the world, actually creating regional hubs in countries and sharing content between the hubs. So each hub was still live, it wasn't virtual, but it's still this idea of rather everybody still making it much more inclusive of people. I think. Nika, what do you think about that? Are we still half the industry is still stuck in the dark ages?
I think first we have to remember who's running our associations. If you look at research, it's, you know, still older white men, to be honest, right? And then on the other hand, you know, you have this young enthusiastic event managers or coordinators, right, who are trying to make a change, but they're just entering their career, right? They are in their late 20s, maybe 30s. Not many associations have a director of events or head of events. Many associations don't have an events professional, right? So the events are run by their board or a CEO who you know works with an agency or not. So I think that's where we're gonna or are seeing a big change, right, between associations who are investing in the knowledge of events professionals and the associations who are either don't have the resources or are run by people who don't understand that bit. Is you know where are we stuck then? So even though we are moving parts of the associations to the new models, we're thinking about it, we're innovating. Quite a lot of them, I think, are. It's not that they don't want to change; they don't know how to change. They don't have an expert, right? I've had conversations with my colleagues, and they were just reluctant to go to virtual because they think, you know, a year or two we'll meet back in London, Sydney, or wherever we're going to meet, and life as we know it returns. But that's not the case, is it? I mean, I think between the four of us, we understand that, but giving that understanding to a larger community is going to take a lot more time.
It is, and it's one of the. It relates to an issue which is also. A massive issue in the events industry is that we're not a recognized industry. So, you know, and that affects lots of things, but it also affects career progression and affects access. But I think your point about board diversity is absolutely key. And I know that, and certainly program diversity as well. I know there are some associations now who have a mandated diversity policy for programs. So programs must be made up of at least 50% women, at least. I don't know. I don't know on specific figures, but let's say at least 10% speakers who are from an ethnically diverse background.
Sorry, Rob, can I just add to that? Just another thing is with you know the structure of the board, and then coming back to live events, right? That structure or that generation has the money to travel. So I think what we'll see in the next 2, 3, 5 years is associations will go, I don't want to say back to live events because back is just the wrong word across the board, but they will go forward to live only events, which means that we'll leave behind all of those the young researchers, young people in their beginning of career development. If I go back to the conversation you had, right, is we're gonna, even if they move to the hybrid, we'll see a, I'm really sorry, but a bunch of old white men in Sydney, but you know, a lot of young people just online. So that generation gap, that disparity between regions is going to grow. So I think for international charities, that is going to be one of the biggest challenges going forward.
I think so. And actually, when I've sat on boards of associations, one of the issues which is spoken about continually is engaging younger people, getting more younger members so that they can become ambassadors and join the association early and become lifelong members. So it's a, if you then use that, the last month we spoke about using events as a membership recruitment model, and this has absolute parallel with that. In the, you know, if you're using your events as a recruitment model, then make sure you engage your younger audience because they're going to be your future members. Neil, where are you on this, on diversity and you know, if in the events industry, I know it feels like we've woken up a bit, but is it going to stay?
Well, you know, just to give a bit of background about me, I was an event manager for over 20 years, and as part of that, I did manage a few associations, did the logistical side as an event manager of a recurring association, an international association that was held in London for about 10 years. And you're right, you know, Nika's dead right there. You know, the way I would put it, and I mean this respectfully, but with some associations, to change anything from the formula that they've always done is like moving the Titanic. I mean, it's quite difficult to do. and I saw it in one of the last ones that I did, where you know, a new chair came in, and the assistant, it was two women, and they wanted to do something quite radically different. And it was quite difficult to get that over to people. The reason I bring this up is, you know, at the moment, I see what's happened is it's been like a chance for us to kind of press the reset button on all of this. You know, suddenly we should be thinking, instead of thinking, well, let's, as Nika rightly said, it's not let's get back to what we were doing. We should always be moving forward. We should always be looking at what we've done and trying to improve it and make it exciting. Because if you just do the same old, you're going to get the same old people coming. You're not going to get new people. You're not going to get fresh ideas. So I'm all for making these things, you know, more of a engaging kind of collaborative things where people online can join in with the conversation as well, because they might have some great ideas, but they might live in Buenos Aires, so not able to come to the event. So I think if we dismiss all that and just say, well, let's get back to live events and let's just, you know, the other on the flip side as well, there is the fact that, you know, I don't believe you can just put a webcam in the corner and say, let's go, let's stream it. There you go, you're part of it now, guys. So it certainly does have to be curated a bit for the online person, but quite how you do that, you know what? We don't really know, because we're only just getting back to it now. And I think what I will say about the event industry is they're very creative at coming up with ideas. And as soon as someone finds a good little niche, everybody will jump onto it and say, oh, I saw they did this at this event and it was amazing. So I think you will find it will spread like wildfire once these good ideas come through, but we'll have to go through this learning process. And I think that's where we are at the moment, to be honest. Okay.
Thank you, Neil. It's good to hear. Creativity, as always, will be our saving grace. Nika, specific question for you. What do you see as your biggest challenges over the next 5 years?
I mean, maybe next 1 or 2 years is just planning with ABC, the risk assessments, plans.
Yeah.
Well, what are we doing? What are we not doing? I think in 5 years' time, we'll be a lot more knowledgeable. I think we'll know a lot more how to engage our audience, how to actually not how to, but actually to know what hybrid means, right? Because at the moment we're throwing the word around, but we're just testing it out. We're not quite sure how do we want to do it, because also we don't have the option to do it, right? Because even if you plan for it, last minute have to move to virtual, maybe the live event won't happen. 5 years time, I think this will calm down. I mean, if the pandemic doesn't calm down, I think all of us need a new profession. At least I do, because this is not what I would want to do. But I think we're gonna go forwards to really discovering what is hybrid, to really discover how we can mix and match, and how can we make sure that we really live up to that EDI commitment that we have, right? What does equity really mean? Because at the moment, I think we're not quite clear on it.
I agree with you. I see there's a new movement there's a new research being done. It's DICE. I'm not sure whether it's DICE or DIC, which I'm taking part in, which is diversity and inclusion for conference and events, and that's some new research which is going on at the moment.
Plug this. You can actually look on the Delegate Wranglers website. There's a link to how to get involved with that. So it's on our news page. So
nice plug there, Neil. Thank you.
Yeah. But if you look at global associations like CRP is, right, how do we make sure that in 5 years time a young person from Argentina and a older person from Singapore have same opportunities, same engagement, and same access to our events? Not same in they all have to both travel to the same destination, but that they can experience the same change in behavior no matter how they attend or engage with our events. So that, I think, in the next 5 years is going to be so interesting to see.
And I wonder whether that kind of hub and spoke model is
definitely one of those options,
worth looking at, because if there's a challenge to traveling internationally, there are the challenges to traveling internationally. For there's one, the accessibility, physical accessibility, and physical disabilities. The second is time and money. So actually, if you have a local hub, and obviously local is an interesting definition, because your local hub might be in a separate country, but we've suddenly got a load of questions coming in from the audience. Thank you very much. We will get some very shortly, but we do need to be really thinking about our audience and what is diversity and inclusion. So for example, I'm a gay white male in the UK. How am I represented, and do I have any particular challenges? I mean, I would say personally I probably don't, but if I'm a black lesbian from Africa who has a disability, and please don't call me out on this, I'm just using examples. How do we make sure that those meetings are accessible? We can only do that by really talking to our attendees and saying, how can we help you get the best out of this meeting? I'm going to turn to some questions now. Thank you very much for engaging with us. Yvonne, hi Yvonne, nice to see you on here. Yvonne's comment, organisers are challenged by lack of comprehensive insurance cover in immediate future. So is this likely to affect forward planning? I mean, yes, I think it will. I have to say I'm not completely up on where we are with the insurance industry now. Nick, have you been looking at it?
No, not really, to be honest, because we're not doing any in-person event at the moment. We're just going virtual, and that, we're minimizing the risk. We're association. We rely on the income from events, and we cannot risk it at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
I was aware that there was a number of insurance companies that had actually excluded anything to do with COVID in their risk policies. So again,
all of them, I would say.
Absolutely. That basically says if you've got a live event planned, and as has happened, as we said, we were talking earlier on about the markets that had already opened up. We've seen it in Australia quite a lot, where you had an event that was being run in Sydney. There was attendees coming from all over the other country, or other states rather, not countries, but states. And the night before, that state went into lockdown, and all of a sudden that event just stopped. So the way that they ended up really, I guess, having some sort of mitigation was to have a strategy to go virtual. Some of them did cancel, but of course that leaves everybody high and dry. So if there's no insurance, it's having a fallback. And as you were talking about earlier on, Rob, it's just planning, which good event planners know how to do.
I know for our ABCO festival, we are looking at our decision dates and saying, okay, what's the latest day, and speaking to our suppliers and saying, okay, realistically, let's look at your costs so that you are not out of pocket. What's the latest we can cancel, what's the dates we cancel, and what's the actual ramifications for us. But also we have to bear in mind sustainability too. So, you know, what's the latest point we can cancel the live portion of the event and not waste any food, because that's a massive consideration too. And I know the past 12 months, all our focus has been taken off of sustainability because we've been in crisis mode solving things. But we mustn't forget and global meetings are have such a massive impact on carbon footprint. We are, if you look at it realistically, we are a polluting industry. Neil.
Rob, I would say as well, though, it's also give us time to consider those. I'd say sustainability has been considered a lot more now. And I know what you're saying. I know you're saying it's not actually been happening, but it's given us a chance to think about things and think about doing things. Whereas we're so constantly on the treadmill as an event manager, you know, you're constantly on this treadmill of organizing things. Suddenly, and venues and everybody's had a chance to go, you know what? Well, maybe we should do things slightly differently and change the way we look at things. And I know there's quite a lot of organizations sprung up to help and assist with that kind of thing as well. Sorry, I just wanted to make that point.
No, it's an important point. And actually, the role of the event manager, I mean, in 10 years, let's say the last 10 years, my job has changed so much. You know, I'm not just thinking about running events now. I'm thinking about, okay, well, how can I run an event sustainability? How can I advise my clients to make sure they're running events which are as accessible as possible? You know, 10 years ago, we were treating dietary requirements as a pain. Now we embrace them. You know, I don't have a list of dietary requirements anymore on my registration forms. I ask the question because actually I ask the question, do you have any what's your dietary requirements? And I give it to the venue and I say, here are the dietary requirements, because it's so important. You know, veganism, and that's all tied to sustainability as well.
Well, it's more than that, actually, Rob. In the respect, we actually changed the software a couple of years ago, very much on that front. You know, we've seen a number of legal cases where you know, there's people with peanut allergies or whatever, and because of the severe case or severity of their cases, they can't even be in close contact with those types of products. So as an event planner, we absolutely need to know about that, and the caterers need to know about that. So it's become a real paramount piece that historically we hadn't really factored in.
Yeah, absolutely. But then we springboard onto accessibility now as well. You know, we're looking at, you know, for example, we are not providing subtitles for this session
yet. We'll put a pin in that and say yet.
Nice.
Oh wow. Okay, more about that another time. But yeah, but actually, so I'm a lot of people don't know this, but I'm deaf. I have partial hearing, so when I watch the TV at home, I need the subtitles on because I find it very difficult to engage with just audio and video. So actually, when I'm attending a conference, if I don't have that, or you have a mumbly speaker, or worse, people are talking around me, I can't isolate particular sounds. If people are talking behind me, I have no idea what's going on because I can't isolate the sound. But if I have subtitles or surtitles, I can watch that. So I'm now an accessibility manager, a D&I manager, you know, looking at all these sorts of things on behalf of my clients too. I'm going to come to another question from Karen Facetta, who was a panelist on our last webinar. Thanks for joining today, Karen. We're making very good points on the subject, and thank you. Enjoying the energy. Can I have that question back, please? Yeah, thank you very much. We're being challenged by our commercial members to meet face to face so they can do business again. But we're going to need to be incredibly creative in ways to bring the public sector along with us in the evolution of our events program going forward. I think that's a great point, and one we've all really struggled with over the last 12 months is, I think, and particularly when we think about exhibitions, let's say we think about a live exhibition, it's still incredibly difficult to deliver any sort of value for exhibitors in an online platform because people don't behave the same way. So I know we need to get our thinking caps on about that. Nika?
I just had a conversation with a potential sponsor yesterday, and it was so refreshing. Yes, the exhibitions don't work, but we learned that. Let's move away from them, right? Let's not try to cram an exhibition in the virtual space for the next how many years. If this is the biggest learn we had in the last year and a half, they don't work. So we have to do it differently. So, you know, talking to a sponsor yesterday, I was able to ask him, which demographic are you targeting? Which region in the world are you targeting? You know, do you want brand engagement? Do you want a discussion? So many more options for the sponsor in the virtual space that, you know, that they can choose between. And, you know, we're developing our events in a way that they're spanning across all time zones. So a sponsor can choose, do they want a live session in Singapore time zone, or do they want to target people in Americas, right? In a live or in-person event, you can't give the sponsor that, right? You stick them somewhere in the exhibition room. If they have a lot of money, you'll give them a stage presence, but, you know, there's no way that you can tell them if you do it at 11 or at 3 p.m. you will get different participants, and we can do that in the virtual space. I mean, I've said that before, but how exciting, right? I mean, it's a new world. So let's stop doing exhibitions because the sponsors don't like them. It's a lot of work for very minimal impact. Let's give them other things, and let's listen to our sponsors. What do they actually want?
Yeah, just Nika, on that point, just to throw a very controversial view out, and I completely agree with Nika, by the way, but the controversial point, and Nika mentioned the old white men that, you know, dominate associations. To be fair, I think that really is a very similar vein in you know, sponsorship, exhibition, and the concept of commercial interaction world as well. I think in all of the conversation we're having today, it's really a case of being open-minded. And there are new ways to interact. They may not be what we knew, and we might need to be a bit creative about what we're doing going forward to get the same or better results. But it is about being open-minded, because as Mika rightly says, a sponsor now could actually have a live stand presentation at any time they want with a targeted group of people, and they can do that in a virtual space. And they don't have to travel around the world to do it. So there are some different ways of doing things, but I don't necessarily think they're all bad.
Thanks very much. There's one last question. We're not going to answer that. It's from Rebecca McRob regarding accessible way to display posters, specifically on events. Rebecca, my colleague Sarah will follow up with you directly about that, and we can arrange a separate conversation about it, because there's a couple of ways to actually do that within the platform. We've got 3 minutes left, so I'm just going to wrap up with a final question. I'm really excited about the answers to this, because the panel have had 24 hours to think about it. So don't let me down, folks. Events 2031, what does that mean to you? Start with Paul.
Oh gosh, so 30 seconds, you know, it's so far away. Technology is going to move so far. I think it is about all inclusiveness. It's about being able to have an in-person, a virtual attendance, whichever way, whichever flavor the attendee wants to mix it, they'll have the option to do it, and they'll have an equitable experience.
Are we going to be seeing Star Wars-esque 3D 3D versions of ourselves around tables?
Well, I don't know about that, but you know, in the 60s we said that we weren't going to have Star Trek type devices that we talked on. So, hey, you know, you never know.
Neil, what about you?
Yeah, again, in 30 seconds, I think we are going to have a lot more personalized experience. And I think that's whether we're in person or online as well. So it could be, you know, I remember hearing a futurist talking about 15 years ago, said, you know, you're going to be walking past posters and they're going to in the street and they're going to be adapting to you. And I think that might be the case when we go to a kind of an association annual event. You know, you might get all these things that are adapted to you personally. So I think very technical. I think there'll be a lot more technical advances, but I still think we definitely need to meet up. It's still a lot of value in those kind of coffee break moments. I'll always say that. One last point, Rob, I wanted to make as well. Sorry, very quickly. Was I think one advantage of having virtual events or online events as well is the key takeaways in terms of collateral that you can use after the event. So you can snip things up, subtitle them, send them to people across all different social platforms. And I think that can be used to kind of promote sponsors and things like that as well, because people often find them very engaging. So I think lots of things like that, automatic things, and I can't wait to hear what Paul can do with his automatic subtitling.
And absolutely, no pressure, Paul. And Nika,
I'm going to spin it the other way. Is we will have to be very careful to not create greater disparity between the rich and the poor, between old and the young, because I hear what Paul and you are saying. I think it's going to be exciting, and I agree with both of them. But that is going to happen in the bigger hubs, or I want to say the Western world. But what we will have to be very careful with is not to forget the developing world and to bring them on this journey with us. So, somebody who only has a tablet or a phone is able to have the similar experience or same experience as somebody who is in person, with the posters changing as they walk by, or maybe in their own personal avatar in the space, in the virtual space. I'm looking for a virtual platform right now, and one of my main demands is it needs to be low bandwidth, because my audience is global. Somebody from a rural setting in Africa needs to be able to have the same experience as somebody connecting as we are from our homes in me in London, right? So it needs to cater for everybody. So I think we will have to work on this in the next 10 years. So 2031, I really, really hope we manage to bridge that.
I hope so too. I hope sooner than that, but it's not going to be a done thing, is it? Accessibility, inclusivity, it's something which we're going to continually evolve and develop. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you, Nika. Thank you, Neil, and thank you, Paul, for giving us your wisdom and your experience today. I've really enjoyed the discussion, and I know the audience have too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob.
That's my pleasure. And to sum up, thank you everybody else for attending. We're going to be taking a break now at the end of August. We're break now until the end of September. But we're going to continue. We're going to have three more webinars this year. We're going to continue on this theme of the future of association events and focus on some much more specialist or much more focused topics in the autumn. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.